Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ask Kati Anything. I'm your host, licensed marriage and family therapist, Kati Morton. I'm so glad that you're here. Today we're going to talk all about loneliness. We have a lot of questions about loneliness and how to cope with feeling isolated and alone. Then I'm also going to explain the reasons behind us being immature or maybe feeling immature and how to not let ourselves be genuinely happy. Sometimes we can get in our own way. And then finally, I'll talk about how to know whether therapy is working for us or not. Now, if you're looking to get your questions answered or you want to be part of our community in a more active way, you can head over to patreon.com/Kati Morton and check out the tiers there. We have live streams every month. We also have them on YouTube over at my Kati Morton channel. You can just hit the join button and we have 4 different live streams each and every month if you're at the top tier there. I hope to see you over on one of those live streams. Without further ado, let's jump into today's questions. Question number 1 says, "Hey Kati, I'm struggling with feeling incredibly lonely, like I don't matter. Even though I logically know there are people who love me, it's hard to shake the feeling that others might be happier without me around. Most of the time, I'm alone outside of work, and I often see others spending time together, which only deepens that feeling. I try to reach out ahead of time and let friends know I'd love to join if they make plans, but when the time comes, I don't get invited. And then I find out that they still got together without me. This has been a pattern for as long as I can remember, and it's hard not to believe that it's because there's something wrong with me or that I'm unlovable. How can I break out of this rut and start to believe that I'm worth connecting with? While I'm safe and won't act on it, it's sometimes really hard to keep battling the thoughts of whether I still want to be here. For context, I was significantly bullied as a kid. I have complex PTSD and am in therapy, both EMDR and talk, and have a history of emotional neglect and abuse from most of my family. Thank you for reading this and for any advice you can offer." Of course. This is a great question, and I think one that a lot of us can struggle with, where we've had a hard time finding our people, and it's hard for us to connect, and therefore we feel lonely, especially if we have a history of trauma. Now, I'm going to go into my gut reaction first, and then we'll talk more about this. My gut reaction to this is, who are those friends, and do we think they are our true friends? I know that might be hard to decide on the spot, but just think about it. Because my real friends, if I reached out to them and said, "I'd love to join if you're doing anything," they'd let me know when they're doing something. And if we weren't really friends, then I wouldn't be surprised that they didn't invite me. And so I'm curious about the types of friendships we have and whether or not they are balanced. Meaning, when we have a history of trauma, we can sometimes find ourselves in relationships that kind of mimic the trauma or at least mimic the neglect in some way, meaning that we find people who are very similar to our abusers or people we've been bullied by or abused by in the past. And even though that's not healthy and that's not what we want, it can often feel like it's the most comfortable because we're used to it, right? And I know that's so annoying, but it's unfortunately the truth. Our bodies love to know what is going to happen. They love to have things that are predictable, and predictability doesn't always mean health. And so I'm very curious about the dynamics of these friendships, if these friendships are all take, no give. If these people that we consider friends don't consider us a friend, do they ever call us? Are we the ones putting in all the effort? These are things that we might want to assess. We might want to bring up in therapy. Consider you're doing talk and EMDR. This would be a great topic to bring up in your talk therapy, because when we have a history of trauma and bullying like this person, we'll have to assess or maybe reassess some of our relationships and the people that we let into our lives. Because that blueprint that we have from childhood or from our relationships before is often an unhealthy one. It can be one where we, do all of the giving, they do all of the taking. It could be one where they neglect us and expect us to cater to them. It could be some narcissistic type of relationship dynamics. We could also find ourselves, around people like that aren't interested in us, but the dynamic of us like striving and thriving for more and like always feeling like we can't quite get to them, we can find ourselves like addicted to that, feeling like that's a normal dynamic in a relationship. And I know I'm giving these random ideas, but everybody's experience is different. The thing that I want to get across here is that we have to assess whether our friendships are really friendships or not. Because like I said, you reach out to them, you tell them to make plans, like I'm available, you're doing everything that a normal person would do with their friends, but then they're not inviting you. And I don't believe in situations where this happens, unless we can pinpoint things that we have done, okay? Remember when I talked about feeling guilty? It's like in a court of law, what's your evidence? So here, I want to know what's your evidence for the fact that something's wrong with you? Because shame thoughts don't have any evidence. They base it out of our trauma response, out of past experiences, not current. So currently, I want you to think about these friendships and whether or not, you've been supportive of them. Do you feel like you have good conversations and you're connecting and you feel like you know each other? Or have you done something? Have you lied to someone? Have you hurt someone's feelings? Have you told them you'd show up when you wouldn't? Do you flake all the time? Did you share a personal experience that you weren't supposed to share with someone that they didn't want to know? I'm making up scenarios, but unless there's some like egregious act and they've told you, hey, you hurt my feelings. Hey, you did this. Hey, I don't really want to spend time with you right now because of blank. If there hasn't been any of that, which I assume there is not, then my gut goes to the fact that these people aren't actually your friends, but you view them that way. And I wonder if that has to do with the emotional neglect, because we're used to chasing. We're not used to having. We're not used to feeling like love and attention is something that's just given. We feel like it has to be earned. And you like striving is the earning. And so overall, I know that's a lot to digest, but because this is a pattern and because you feel like it's been as long as you can remember, I want you to talk to your therapist about this. And I want you to figure out what the people who are in your life who are supposed to be your quote unquote friends, what they have in common. And I want you to pay attention to that, because when we try to make new friends, which is my goal for you, is to reach out to different people, I want you to make sure that they do not have those traits. Because for whatever reason, that blueprint that we have, even though it's not healthy or good for us, we're taking that out into the world and we're looking for other people who are similar. And that's just giving us the same result over and over and over, which is disconnection, loneliness, and isolation. And frankly, you deserve better. We just have to find people who can actually meet you where you're at and aren't just taking from you or aren't unavailable or not interested. We need to find people who want to get to know you, who find you interesting, who want to support, who want to share their life with you as you share yours. We need to find those people because they exist. We just are picking the wrong ones, I think. Okay? Moving on to question number 2. This question says, hi, Katie. How do I deal with being alone? My boyfriend of 6 years is moving away for a few months for his university placements before I join him later in the year for our permanent move. I'm terrified of being left at home by myself. I know I can talk to him every day, but it just won't feel the same. I'm very affectionate and love physical closeness, so being physically distant feels heartbreaking. How can I cope if traveling to see him isn't an option due to the need to save money for the move in the future? I love this question because I'm glad you have a great relationship. I'm glad that you're going to make the permanent move. We just have like this period of time where you're going to be separated. It sounds like a few months maybe, because you said later in the year. So let's say 6 months or so. I know you're moving, but my encouragement is to have other people in your life. This sounds kind of like your boyfriend is the only person that you spend time with. Because you said you're terrified of being left at home by yourself. Now, if this is to do with sleeping at night and feeling like uneasy living alone, then put some things in place to help you feel more secure, meaning like locks on all your doors and windows that like there's these things I travel with. I don't know if anybody's seen these, but they're like door stoppers that if the door gets pushed into them, they like sound an alarm. And there's also these extra locks you can put into your hotel room that like locks it, like metal, like I use both of those when I travel by myself. And I encourage you to do that too if you don't feel safe, if that's where this is coming from. But what I get from this, or what my gut tells me, is that this is coming from the fact that our boyfriend is our only social life, is the only person that we really spend time with. And I encourage you to spend time with other people. Reach out to other people in your community. You must have been living there for a while. You said 6 years, so I'd assume you've lived in this area for a period of time. Reach out to friends, family, colleagues, people that you go to school with, peers, whatever, and let's do other things. Let's spend time with other people. Your boyfriend is not the only person in your life, and he should never be the only person in your life. I know that a lot of us don't know how to balance all of those things, and we can put ourselves completely into a relationship and cut off the rest of the people. But I can tell you, as someone who moved away from all of my friends and only has my partner, that's just not a balanced way to live life. I call and text and try to reach out to my friends as much as possible because I'm missing that in-person time, because that's a whole nother part of who I am. I need to have different people in my life for different reasons. And I know you might be thinking, well, I don't need that. Clearly you do, because if he ever goes out of town, you're all by yourself. And right now he's moving away and we don't have another support system. And so, I mean, it's fine to have a very close relationship with someone. It's fine to enjoy their company. In fact, we should love to be with them. But we can never, and I know I don't say these words very often, but never is a strong word, but we should never have one person in our life that is responsible for our entire social life, our entire connection, our entire self. We need to have a good relationship with ourselves. We need to have a good relationship with some other people, some friends, and maybe family, if our family happens to be like healthy, loving, and we want them in our lives. We need to have a broad support system, people that we reach out to for different reasons. Like I have some friends that are like my deep dive friends where I'm like, I'm having like these very intense, like emotional responses. I really want to dig into where that's coming from. And I know that they can go there with me. There's also my friends that I want to just have a good time with. And I have to be honest, as I've gotten older, the good time friends become fewer and far in between. It's more the deep dive friends, the friends that can meet me where I'm at and like have these intense conversations. Maybe that's just me, but we can have different friends for different reasons, right? And different friends will also offer different advice and they have different views and different perspectives. We need that breadth of support. Our social system or social network needs to be very broad. It needs to be expansive. It can't be just one person. And so the best way to cope is really to reach out to other people and to keep yourself busy with social interactions that feel fulfilling. They're not going to replace your boyfriend. That's not the goal. The goal is not to replace him, but is for him to be one piece and for all these other people to fulfill these other needs to help keep you afloat when he's not around. That doesn't mean you're not going to miss him and you're not going to be lonely. I understand. Sean was gone for like 4 or 6 weeks. I forget how long back in the day. And that was terrible. It's horrible. I did see my friends a lot. I did go to extra yoga classes because I had extra time on my hands. But it's important that we have those other supports because we can't just have one person that we count on, especially, if he's going to university placement, if you're doing your own work, like we need to have our own thing going. The person in our life, partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, whomever, they're just another wonderful addition. They're not the whole thing. And so I encourage you to build that up a little bit, okay? And friends can offer, some of that physical touch too. Lots of hugs, rub your back, grab your arm, tell you it's so good to see you, all that good stuff. Let's move on to question number 3. This question says, "Hi, Katie. My therapist recently told me that I was emotionally immature." Ooh, it's true, but it still hurt to hear it, I can imagine. Even though I have a lot of other issues, I'm a highly sensitive person, I have low self-esteem, I want to work on improving myself. Do you have any tips or tools to improve my emotional maturity? Thanks for your amazing podcast. You've had such a positive impact on my life. Oh, I'm so glad. Yay. Wonderful. Now, emotional immaturity is incredibly common. I would argue a lot of our parents and grandparents, older people in our lives are emotionally immature. And this usually comes out of kind of like 2 places, although I think they're kind of the same. But one is just a lack of understanding of emotions. Essentially, like we don't really know what anger feels like. It was never safe to express it. We don't know what happiness is like because we never had anybody tell us and we never really got a chance to talk about it. So there's a lack of emotional intelligence. Then on the other side, there can be this kind of like reactivity where it's not just the not knowing, it's that we don't know what to do with that emotion. So even if we do know what it is, we don't know how to express it. And that can mean that we lash out, we can like stuff down how we feel for a really long period of time and then explode, right? Like especially things like anger, irritation, frustration, those can kind of resentments can build and then we explode. And it's usually us having an overreaction in a moment because of all the things we didn't express. So it can kind of come from those 2 places, but they're kind of linked, as I'm sure you can tell. So the way to work on this is to start getting to know our emotions and ourself And I know people talk about this all the time, like, oh, you got to get to know yourself. You got to feel it. You got to process it through. You got to let the emotions flow through you. And everybody's sitting there, liking a meme going, well, how the hell do I do that? And the truth about it is that part of it's in the identifying. That's why I talk about the feelings wheel. You can go to feelingswheel.com. It's a beautiful representation. There's also another one someone sent me. Oh, I didn't save it. Damn. But anyway, on one of our Patreon live streams, someone sent me one that is more in depth than that, and I really liked it. But anyways, neither here nor there. Feelings wheel is great. Helps you put words to what you're experiencing. But then there's this piece of understanding what the emotion is trying to tell you. And I think this process can be done through journaling. I think that's like the best way we can go about it. And that means that, like, let's say I've identified irritation. That's how I feel. I feel irritated. Oh, everything's agitated. Oh, I hate it. So irritated. Ugh, right? That's the emotion. Then what is irritation trying to tell me? It's trying to tell me maybe that a boundary's been overstepped. Maybe I haven't upheld one of my promises to myself. Maybe I didn't hold the boundary. Maybe someone did something that I am hurt by. I need to communicate that hurt. Maybe it's because I didn't take care of myself. My resilience is low, so everything irritates me. Maybe I haven't been sleeping well. I haven't been eating well. I haven't been drinking water. On and on and on. You get the point. Emotions tell us things. They don't always need to be responded or reacted to, but they still tell us information. They're helpful. They're like the data that our body and brain collects throughout our days. And if we don't acknowledge them, if we don't like jot them down and track the data, pay attention, recognize all this data kind of builds up, and then we can have experiences and reactions that we're not even sure where they came from or why we're reacting that way, because it's all jumbled in that messed up data that we haven't allowed to flow through. Does that make sense? I like to think of it kind of like on a screen of a computer. You know how, like, I'm not a tech person, but like the ones and zeros on, it's like black and then green, almost like we're in the Matrix, and it's like sliding along a black screen, blah, 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 blah. And those are all of our feelings that we're having every day. But if we're trying to suppress them, imagine me pushing down as those things try to go, as the numbers try to flow up the screen. No, I'm not letting them. And then I'm like, oh, I'm so exhausted, and I let my hands off of it. All that data, all those emotions come flooding in. I can feel really overreactive. I can feel really just on edge and like explosive because I didn't allow that to flow through as it came through. And so to that end, along with the identification and the acknowledgement of what we're experiencing, trying to understand what that feeling is telling us, like, why does it exist? What's its role? Then there's this piece of learning to express emotions in a thoughtful way. Being very, it doesn't mean being careful, like controlled. It's more like when we're expressing it, it has intent behind it. We're being intentional with how we express it. Meaning that if I'm angry, that emotion is protective usually, but the urge might be to scream or to yell at someone, to shame them, to blame them. But that's not really me having like a good intent behind. I'm not being intentional about that expression. A good intentional move would be to consider what anger is telling me. Hey, this person's disrespected me and they're asking me to do things that I don't want to do. Then the better way, or the healthier, more intentional way of expressing that anger would be to tell them, I told you no, that I can't do this, and you keep pushing me, and I find it very disrespectful. And so I'm going to, again, have to politely decline your request for me to do X, Y, or Z, or to do this for you. I am unable to do it at the time, right? And I know for a lot of us, that assertiveness, I'm not really being confrontational. I'm not being like aggressive. I'm being clear. I'm asserting myself. And that action is a healthier way to express the underlying emotion, that anger. Because again, it's just protective. It tells me something and I need to act on it. And so for you, if you're feeling emotionally immature, if you're feeling like you're reactive, you're feeling like you don't even know, and maybe you even, lash out in like childlike ways, you're kind of passive aggressive, name calling. We find ourselves feeling that way a lot. I want you to start journaling. We don't have to do this in real life yet. We can do it in journal format where we imagine ourselves expressing how we're feeling to someone else. And then I want you to read it back and say, would Katie think that this is kind of more of a childlike reaction? What would I think that Katie would say? Or what would an adult in my life, my therapist, how would they communicate this in a better way? Because if our reaction is to go, like snarky, kind of like a childlike reaction, which we all feel that way from time to time, if we find that's our response or the way we want to react to someone, then the more adult way would be, can I put that into real words that give some construction and some action that they could take to make it right? So if I'm mad and I'm like, well, you always do this and you're just being so stupid and I can't even believe you'd even look at me in the eye and try to tell me like, right? Then the real adult response would be, I'm feeling upset because you said this and you did this, and those are two different things. And so I find it hard to have a serious conversation with you because I don't feel like I can trust you. I'm making up fake scenarios, but you get what I'm saying. That like being emotionally immature means not having the knowledge about it, stuffing it down, maybe ignoring it completely, and then lashing out in a way that's not really constructive, that doesn't actually move anything forward. And honestly, if we think about it, it makes us look bad, right? That's not who we want to be. That's not a way to respond to life. And so we want to get better. Like this person said, I really want to get better. I'm working on improving myself. That's one of the biggest first steps. But this second piece is really finding a way to communicate about how you feel. And that's going to be a process. Like I said, we're walking through it little by little, but you'll get there. And there will come days where your resilience is low, and you're tired, and somebody just pokes you, just your last nerve, and you can still act immaturely. We all can find ourselves in those situations. No one is perfect, but the goal is for you to be able to acknowledge how you're feeling, communicate about it in a thoughtful way. And if that takes a little time, that you are able to give yourself that time between the thing happening and you reacting. And as someone who still works on this, trust me when I tell you it can and will get better. And when you communicate, it's going to be hard, it's going to be uncomfortable, but the outcomes are always way, way better. Okay? Hang in there. I hope that helps. Moving on to question number 4. This question says, why won't I allow myself to be genuinely happy? Good question. I've been diagnosed with MDD and GAD, generalized anxiety disorder. And MDD stands for major depressive disorder, just in case no one knows. I go through depressive episodes that last a few days to about a week, and they happen every few months. It used to last much longer and come more frequently, but meds, therapy, and PHP, partial hospitalization programs, have brought it down to where it is now. Yay. However, when I'm not in an episode, I feel like I'm existing and not living. It's like my mind won't let me be happy. It's a point I feel stuck with in therapy. Please help. Thanks for everything, Katie. Of course. This is a great question. And I'm going to take some guesses here. We're going to make some assumptions and you let me know. Now, allowing ourselves to be genuinely happy could be the first thing I'm going to say, because this is just my knee-jerk reaction, is like, I wonder if your medication's not quite good enough. Now, I know easier said than done, changing medications, trying medications. You have to talk to your psychiatrist. All of that I know is a pain in the ass. But whenever I have patients who are like mostly better, but not fully better, I'm like, oh, I wonder if you need to increase the dose. I wonder if you need to add a different medication onto that. Or, again, I'm not a doctor. Talk to your psychiatrist. But sometimes when we find ourselves, oh, we're on the path, but we've kind of like plateaued. How do we get it to keep moving? And medication can sometimes be what's holding us back. It's pulled us out of the depths, but we're not really thriving. And we want to get us to thriving. So I encourage you to let your psychiatrist know that that's happening. So that's my first thing. Second is sometimes there's this struggle. When we've had depression for a long time, happiness can feel fake, can feel stupid. We can hate it. And we can think that it leaves us vulnerable to somebody just letting us down again, because depression can be very has a negative bias. So it's always looking for something to go wrong or assuming that something will go wrong. Okay. And so to allow ourselves to be genuinely happy means letting our guard down. It means that, we're admitting that things in life actually can go well and we're excited, and all of that can feel very foreign, very uncomfortable, and sometimes very dangerous. And so as a way of protecting ourselves from being let down and for feeling like things just never go our way, and being disappointed, frustrated, all those things, we can feel our body and brain can kind of prevent us from experiencing that. It's like a protective mechanism. It's almost like, it'll let us get to this height and it's like, okay, whoa. That's as high as we know. The rest, Unknown, terrifying, right? Because if we've had MDD and GAD for a really long time, for much of our life, we might not even remember or even know, maybe we've never experienced true happiness. And so we might not feel safe to do it. And so I encourage you, obviously bring it up to your doctor about, medication. But I would, instead of trying to figure out how do I let myself be happy, let's consider what it would mean. Let's check our definitions. What does it mean to be happy? Genuinely happy. How would you define that? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Can you tell me? We might run into a part of it here where we don't even know what that would look like. And so maybe part of our therapeutic work is trying to put that together, because maybe we are genuinely happy and we just don't know it, right? There's that piece too. And so I think for a lot of us, we can feel like we can't allow it for all the reasons I mentioned, or we don't even know if we were feeling it because we've never experienced it before. So be a little bit curious, not judgmental about your process here, and let's see what we can learn, okay? Yeah. Final question number 5 says, "Hi, Katie. I have been in therapy for a couple of years and I still can't figure out if it's working or not. Some of my symptoms have faded. I feel more functional and my physical symptoms have minimized. However, I feel more suicidal than I ever have. I struggle with self-harm. I always feel horrible about myself, and the only thing that I look forward to is therapy. It's like my whole life just relies on therapy and my therapist. Without it, when it gets canceled or rescheduled, I feel like I'm back at square one. My whole week is ruined and I feel empty and trapped. I decide I will never go back, but I do anyway. I feel like I go to therapy more for validation and love than for solving my problems. I feel horrified that my therapist will leave. And when I see her other clients, I cry for hours thinking they will soon replace me and that she likes them better anyway. Although I know her job is to help everyone, not just me. I know this is a lot. Could you please tell me why this happens and what I should do to fix it? Should I even be allowed to go to therapy if I'm just wasting her time? Thank you, Katie, for everything. You're a lifesaver." Of course. Happy to help. Now, I think a lot of us feel this way. Like therapy is something we rely on. And there's nothing wrong with feeling like therapy is helpful and we look forward to it and we want to have that hour. I know when I was having a hard time, I would do that too, where I would just feel like I was almost counting down the days to where I could dump it all because it was my safe space, right? So I want to normalize that experience. However, this feeling like you don't want to go back, I'm never going to go back, but then you do anyways. And this feeling like you need therapy for validation and love than solving problems, to me, this just reeks of attachment. What I mean by that is that when we were born, I don't know what happened in your childhood, but within the first 5 years of your life, your parents weren't consistent or loving in the way that you needed. Something happened. And so we don't really feel secure in ourselves and in our foundation of our life to go out and do our own thing without having to continually come back to this and try to hold it close or try to push it away. It doesn't feel safe, right? We're reactive because we don't feel secure. And so this to me feels very much like an anxious attachment where we kind of want to hold the therapist close. Like you don't want her seeing other patients. You don't want to think that therapy is ever going to end. The fear of abandonment or the fear or threat of loss of the therapist is it's too overwhelming. It's completely dysregulating. And so inner child work, I have tons of videos on YouTube about inner child work. I also have a workshop available at katimorton.com under the shop. Those are going to be incredibly helpful tools, as well as the attachment workshop and all of my attachment videos. That's where this is coming from. Now, the good news is that we can heal from an anxious, avoidant, or disorganized attachment and develop a secure attachment. So there is hope. Don't worry. What that's going to take is healing from that past experience, figuring out what it is we need to give to ourselves, and then offering that. And I know that sucks. And we wish we could get it from someone else. Like in this person's case, they're getting it from their therapist. And that's the reason for this clingy feeling, is because we're able to get from our therapist what we wished we'd gotten from our parents. And that's a bummer. And it's okay to grieve and it's okay to feel sad. I'd encourage you honestly to bring this up with your therapist, because this work is going to 100% include them, meaning we're going to have to, and this will be down the line, so don't worry, but we're going to have to be able to talk to our therapist about the things that we are trying to get from them and the things that we think they give to us. We're going to have to start to figure that out. And you can do that on your own right now through journaling. Like you said, validation and love, I'd put those on the list already, that those are the things we're looking for. It might be consistency too, because you said like if it gets canceled or rescheduled, it's like you're back at square one. So there's like this all or nothing feeling. I don't know if it's that your therapist like sees you and hears you and you feel understood and you never have felt that before. That might be part of it. All of these things are going to be important because that's going to help us put together what we offer ourselves. Meaning that let's say my parents never made me feel seen or understood. I always felt like they wanted me to be somebody I wasn't. And they expected me to look and do things that it just wasn't in line with who I was. I never felt like they got me. Then I find a therapist who sees and hears me and, oh, feels so good. But how can I give that to myself? That means that when I give that to myself, that means that I start talking kindly to myself about those parts that maybe I don't think are acceptable from my parents. Like I like to wear funky clothes and they never approved, or I like hard rock and they always like jazz. I'm just making things up. I want you to notice those things and I want you to talk nicer to yourself about it. Like, it's okay that I wasn't as driven as my brother who went to Princeton. I wanted to be an artist. And that's okay. I love that I'm an artist. I love that artsy side of myself. Or maybe your parents wanted you to be an artist and you want to be an accountant. There's no right or wrong way. I'm just saying that like whatever it is for you, whatever you feel, maybe it was just the fact that they never made space for you. Then how do you make space for yourself? Do you set aside time to journal? Do you set aside time to hear your own thoughts without scrolling into your phone and getting on social media to distract? There are ways that we can offer those things to ourselves that doesn't feel like woo-woo or weird or depressing. It's more like I'm continuing to hurt myself with the same things my parents hurt me with because that's all I know. And so we have to relearn a new way of interacting with us, talking to ourselves, hearing from ourselves. And I know that can sound really weird, but so often we distract instead of tap in. And so the whole goal of this work, this whole goal of inner child work and attachment work is about us seeing, hearing, and understanding ourselves and giving ourselves an opportunity to meet and to offer the things we never got. I don't think it's that woo-woo. I think it's things that we all should do. We should all be celebrating the parts of ourselves that maybe we've never gotten the opportunity to celebrate before. You're wonderful, unique, and amazing as you are. And we need to find a way to give that back to ourselves. And that, I believe, will help heal that wound that you've tried to shove your therapist into, which is what makes you so nervous that she's going to leave and that it's going to end. It's going to be okay. We have to find a way to soothe, and some of that's going to be giving ourselves the things that our therapist is giving us and the things that we wished our parents had. So take your time with it. But like I said, I have tons of videos about attachment, tons of videos about inner child work. I have workshops on my website, katimorton.com, about both. You can check those out. Those will be helpful as well. Thank you so much for being part of the community, for asking your questions. Thank you guys for showing up and listening and watching and sharing the podcast. It really does help. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Do your homework, and I'll see you next time. Okay, Sean, finished. I'm finished. Here. Cut video here.